Welcome everyone to this interview with Dr. Sophie Carr. This is the third of our interview series that we've been holding for the Future Leaders programs. Unfortunately, the future leader who was planned to do this interview is unable to attend today's recording, so you're stuck with myself doing the interview, but I'll give you a bit of background to me in my introduction as we go forward. So a bit of background about the Future Leaders scheme and why we do this. It's part of the Royal Statistical Society's commitment to promoting diversity and inclusion in statistics, data science and related professions. We launched a program to support data professionals from ethnic minority backgrounds and other underrepresented backgrounds to be future leaders funded by the Academy of Social Sciences. It's motivated by the phrase, you cannot be what you cannot see. And our Future Leaders program aims to celebrate the diversity of the data professions and empower data professionals from underrepresented groups to pursue leadership positions within the RSS and the wider data community, working with us to inspire future generations of statisticians, data scientists and data analysts and so forth. With regards to why we set up these interviews particularly, it's because when we met the future leaders, leadership was one of the key themes that come out of our early discussions with them. There was great interest in how they could aspire to be leaders in data and the skills and knowledge that was required, as well as how and where they could find information about career development. So it was suggested that they put together a list of suitable leaders they would like to approach for interview in hope of bringing an understanding to them whilst being able to provide information to a wider audience as well, which is why we'll be recording and making this interview available for all. With regards to the session itself, I will do some brief introductions as we start, and then we'll go into questions with Dr. Sophie Carr, and then we'll, after the answers, we'll finish the interview, and then the recording will be made available in due course. So a bit of background about myself. So I'm Ricky McGowan. I'm Head of Standards and Corporate Relations at the RSS. I've been working with the RSS for about 7 years, and I've also been working in professional development, so professional awarding bodies for about 15, 16 years now. For me, this is quite close to my heart because I come from what is traditionally an underrepresented background, from the poorest borough in London. I didn't go to college, didn't go to university in a traditional way, and I sort of found myself working in this industry from early career as a sort of apprentice, as you will, learning the trade as we go forth. And here we are 15 years later, hoping to repay it to other people from similar backgrounds. And so it's very close to my heart, and I'm very pleased that Dr. Carr has joined us today. And I'll call you Sophie. So Sophie, are you able to just give us a brief introduction as to you, and then we'll go into the first question, if that's okay. I'll ask it afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Sophie Carr. I come from Barnsley. I grew up during the miners' strike in there, and I didn't want to be a statistician. I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer when I grew up, and I went and studied aeronautical engineering. So I too am accidentally in statistics. I founded and own my company called Bays Consulting. It's 15 years old now, and I've slowly moved, I guess, from working in statistics to running and managing a business now.
Brilliant, thank you. You touched on that first, the first question we were going to ask actually. So it was about after giving the introduction. So how did you begin this pathway into statistics and data, and how did it differ from that original dream? I guess there was data involved in that dream, but
I mean, it's ever so simple. Growing up, I loved physics more than anything else. Physics was the thing I absolutely loved at GCSEs, loved physics at A-level. And I wanted to work with aeroplanes because aeroplanes, for some reason, from being absolutely tiny, aeroplanes were the things that fascinated me. I just thought, oh, aeroplanes were amazing. But not many kids from Barnsley went to be aeronautical engineers. And I didn't know how to be an aeronautical engineer until I found out that you could literally do a degree in aeroplanes. And I decided I was going to do that instead of physics because it's just fluid mechanics, and it's fluid mechanics was the thing I really loved, A-level physics and Bernoulli's. So I did aeronautical engineering because you just get to talk about planes all day. But I'm not a practical engineer. And then I did an applied maths and fluid mechanics MSc and thought I was going to design gas turbine blades all my life. Genuinely, that was where my career was going. And I messed up my first job interview so badly I can't describe it. Didn't get the job as being a gas turbine engineer, but did end up working in what I think would be called operations research. And that resulted in me actually working as a trials engineer with large aircraft flying around the world, which was very, very cool. Got the job of my dreams at 24. Whilst I was flying around the world being a trials engineer, I started to get interested in why we're missing information. And this is going back sort of to the early 2000s. And I said to my employer at the time, how do I do a PhD in this thing? It looks really cool. And they very kindly paid for a PhD that took 8 years. It was part-time, and it was in Bayesian statistics. And it was then that I stopped loving aeroplanes the most in my life and started liking statistics. And I often say I am absolutely not where I thought I would be, but I think I'm where I'm meant to be. So it was very circuitous. It was just I was flying and went, how do I work out why we're missing information? And it turned out it was Bayesian stats.
Brilliant. I love that. Not where I thought I'd be, but definitely where I meant to be. I think that's amazing. It's a great way of looking at it. I guess I would say the same. So, and apologies to the audience, because yeah, some of these questions are written as if they're from a woman's point of view, but this question is important. So, as a woman in what is perceived to be traditionally male-dominated fields, stereotypically, and even from owning your own business as well. Do you feel you've had to approach certain aspects of your career differently in order to stand out and succeed? And if so, what strategies or actions did you find most effective?
So I've really thought about this question, and it's really hard for me to answer, because the truth is I've only ever been me. I don't know if I would have approached things differently if I'd not been me. And I think there's sort of several ways of looking at this. I've never had a problem with a seat at the table. Sometimes I've had a bit of an issue getting my seat at the table. But have I ever fundamentally changed who I am or what I've had to do to get somewhere? No, I don't think I have, but I'm well aware that women who are in non-traditionally viewed female roles, it's often very easy to label them as being frosty or hard or something like that, just because you're speaking in a way that others might not be used to. But I'm really with is it Sheryl Sandberg, the lady who founded Spanx, and she gives this great quote about saying that there's room for everyone, and you don't have to treat business or the world of work as being some sort of battleground. There is room for everyone. And I think that's how I've generally taken it. Of I wanted to go and do something, and I might have not known how to get there. So the question has been, how do I get there? What do I have to do? And yeah, it's not always been easy, but I'm going to be clear here. It doesn't matter who you are, getting a degree in aeronautical engineering or doing a PhD, it's challenging for everyone. And I had my challenges, and it was just a case of saying, well, I just want to get there. And I think that because I have always loved what I've done, and do not get me wrong, I have loved every job I've had, working out how to get to the next step has actually been a bit of a challenge and enjoyable. It's not been something that I ever saw as insurmountable, and that's not to say, like I say, it's not been hard. I just don't think I can't answer would I have done anything differently, because I just don't know. I just don't know any different.
I think that's a good piece of advice in itself, because I think it's you be true to you be yourself throughout. And I think especially with data, if it's a man or woman, whoever approaching the problem doesn't change, and how you approach it shouldn't or doesn't change. And being yourself is true to how you would approach that solution regardless, and getting recognition for that is right, regardless of who you are and how you are. So I think, and it mirrors some of the other feedback we've had to similar questions about this. Is be yourself and trust in that, trust in your skills.
Now that is something that I think can be really hard to do. The number of times I've had to sit there and go, well, I or my company want to approach a problem like this, and you're sort of looking around going, well, other people aren't doing that, and should we be a bit more like them, or should I do that? And it's really hard to sit there and go, no, the way that we would approach this is like that. And I think holding on to that belief that the approach you've taken is the one you want to take, it can be really hard, and it can be a bit lonely, but yeah, it's the right thing in the end.
Brilliant. Thank you. And what advice would you give to your younger self about career development and where you might find support?
So that's a really interesting one because, I mean, if I could go back and tell my younger self that you are going to end up flying around the world with aeroplanes and actually be an aeronautical engineer when she was about 12 or 13, I think I would have just laughed at you and have gone, don't be stupid. No, people like me don't get to do that. But I did. I think I would tell her, get yourself a mentor much, much earlier, because I left it far too late to find out about how awesome mentors are. There's no doubt that building a strong network is really helpful so you can bounce ideas and have more people to ask questions of. But the thing I always say is you've just got to read like your life depends on it. Because the more you read and the more voices you hear, and I don't just mean, a quick flick on social media, I mean actually reading, and whether that's on Audible or other book, voice listening, reading apps or whatever it is, the more you read and the more voices you hear and the more you can take in information, the more you start to go, well, I think I'd really like to have a go at that. And the other thing I'd say, and I only found this out by accident when I was quite early in my career, is don't be afraid to email people in positions of jobs you want. And it might be that you want that job in 10, 20 years, but just, how'd you get there? People are often happy to help. Just got to ask.
Ask the question. I think that was something that came out of a similar interview and a similar question we asked. Andy Garrett was obviously the president of the RSS, and he said that actually he's found probably more gratification in helping in answering those questions for others, and he finds that people actually, when he was also younger, people enjoyed answering those types of questions when they're approached. So because people like the most natural thing is for people to talk about themselves, and they enjoy it, so they're actually happy to give that advice. So don't be afraid to ask. It's really, I think, key.
Oh, and do you know what, you've hit the nail on the head with something that I only realized maybe probably 3-4 years ago when Bays grew quite quickly and we started taking more people. I always said that I wouldn't have a company of multiple employees because I just loved coding and tech, and that's what I wanted to do. I completely underestimated the absolute joy and total fulfillment you can get in seeing other people succeed. I did not learn until a few years ago, and it's just utterly joyous to see my tech team and other people who work at Bays do something really, really well.
I think that's one of the things I personally love about working in professional development is seeing people join the society, join it from, say, data analyst or grad stat and going all the way to chartered and being able to see their journey, work with them, not from a detailed subject matter expert point of view, but just from a supporting point of view of seeing them go through that journey, build their network, use the mentoring scheme and really develop, and then see them give back as well, and see them do the same as well to others. And I think there's something really about it that's quite powerful, I think, and really good to see. You've sort of gone on to it and mentioned it in a way. So we have the mentoring scheme that talks about where people are able to volunteer and give back, and it's really successful, and we'd like to see it grow more. But you're someone who's dedicated a lot of time to volunteering and working with bodies like the RSS, I know the IMA and OR Society. How has this experience influenced your own career growth and helped you develop your leadership skills as well?
So in terms of career growth, you can get out what you put in, don't you, in many ways. And I think actually volunteering at the RSS, yes, I like statistics, and yes, I like maths, and I help at the IMA as far as I can as well. But the more you get to know people in your area, volunteering is one of those really great ways to do it. And at the RSS conference this year, I was talking to Beverly, and it was quite interesting. It turned out our first RSS conference ever was the same one, and now we're turning up 20 odd years later, and it's like, oh, actually I know quite a few people here, and I'm a bit of an old hand. But part of that has been going and like you say, just meeting so many people of every age range and every point in their career, and realizing you're not alone, and that there is this massive world of statistics out there, most of which I don't do, and I'm not involved in, but hearing about the different techniques. And I think that's the thing that volunteering gives you in terms of career growth, is you just get to learn about more stuff, and you get to meet more people, and you get those conversations of, oh, how are you applying that, or why are you doing that? I think is immense. And you get to meet and make friends, and just have that lovely body of statisticians of going, okay, it's great, I'm not alone. Because sometimes saying you're a statistician, you can get the odd look of, okay, and no, there's a whole group of us out here, you just don't know about us. So in terms of my career, that's it. And what do I get from it? Well, it's just brilliant. And like you say, it's that really nice thing to be able to help, but also know that you're being helped. And I think that's what volunteering gives you, is this understanding of the breadth of what the RSS does, and learning about stats, and just meeting really cool people as well.
That's really helpful. And I guess for someone who owns their own company as well, and manages others, I suppose being able to volunteer with other societies and see from a governance point of view how they operate, does that help in terms of how you approach this as well, but just having sort of transparency in how another organization approaches work, and sees that, does it, and then you vice versa, you're then able to give back in a different way, less traditional to being just the subject matter expert, it's actually a business advice as well.
So I think there's two aspects of that. So first things, when you join Bays, if you are working in the tech, you have to work towards chartership. Pick your organization, pick what you're doing, but it's kind of not an option. Off you go, because it gives you a really nice framework. I think sitting on the council, and now because I'm the Vice President of Education Stats Literary on the exec, yes, I bring a business perspective as opposed to an academic perspective. And that's just a different way of looking at things. And maybe I ask questions at council or to the other members of the execs in just a different way. But yes, the RSS is bigger than me. So equally, I get to look and go, oh, what's your ops and governance procedure look like? Okay, how? And yes, I think that's absolutely fair, that I can ask questions differently, or with a different slant on them, and hopefully that helps.
I think it's great. I think it also gives the wide range of opportunities to get involved with bodies, and the sort of access to skills that they might not feel that is actually there, but they might not see on the surface. I think when you mentioned being a member of a body and then working with a body or volunteering, you think very much, it's very easy to think of the just focusing on the subject matter or just the incidents of helping, where actually there are options to broaden that skill set.
And I think that goes back to that community. So if you think of the RSS conference, there are the helpers in the t-shirts. And Beverly and I are actually talking about that very, very first time we went to a conference, and we walked into the first night welcoming drinks, and both of us said we actually both turned around and walked out. And now when you go to the RSS, there are all those people in t-shirts who go, hey, it's okay, come this way. Do you know where you're going? Have you got a drink? Have you met? And that is such a crucial part of the volunteering that people might overlook, but it's so important when you turn up and there's a smiley face on the desk, and a smiley face to help get your lanyard, and somebody to make sure you know where you're going, and somebody to help find the rooms. Absolutely critical.
It's something I love about our conference, I think, and especially that most of that's run by the YSS section, so yes, the Young Statistician Society, for those listening. And it's something about knowing that it's someone who has been in your shoes, who has done that, and is like you, looks like you, and takes you through that. And they did a great session on the first day of conference for young members who it's their first time going to a conference. They sit them down, what to expect, this is how to approach a conference, this is how you can get involved. And I think that it's something that must take a weight off their mind, especially when it is a new environment to them, that you suddenly feel, oh right, this is a community, this is exactly that what you've described. I think it's brilliant. So you mentioned your VP role. Given the amount of data available every day to the general public, can you describe how important data literacy and education is, and the responsibility we have to those working in data have to help the public gain a greater understanding of data?
So I think it's absolutely fundamental to society, and that's the point I start from. So if we think about the really big societal challenges that we are facing, and people talk quite broadly about things like AI as though it's just this panacea. So let's talk about things such as driverless cars, or you might want to talk about your insurance premiums or the chances of you being selected for interview at a job. And that's when you start to talk about words such as AI and big data and machine learning. Underpinning all of that, like it or not, are people writing algorithms. Sentient being AI, it's not a thing yet. We're talking about coded algorithms. So if we as data literate people, and by that you can call yourself data professionals, or whether that's statisticians, whatever you're working, it is incumbent on us to go and have those unbelievably important conversations with the whole of society. Because if we don't have those, people will not understand that there could be bias in data training sets, which means that you might not be selected to go, your CV might not get through to go for interview, or your insurance premiums are going to go up because that's just automatically calculated based on where you live or what your job is. And driverless cars. Okay, so what do you want to do in those horrible ethical decisions about, do you save the people inside the car or outside? And it's easy to say, well, that's not a stats problem, or that's not a data problem, but it is. And if we do not engage society in these unbelievably big conversations and decisions, then we leave portions of society behind. And that's just wrong, because nobody should be left behind in those decisions. If you then want to take it down to a slightly lower level, and how do I operate and function in society on every day? Well, I'm going to separate out maths, numeracy and stats. Okay, you have to have a level of numeracy. You have to be able to understand if you've got the correct change. You have to be able to operate in that world. Then you need some levels of mathematics. So can I understand the difference between my interest rates on my credit cards and things like that? And can I make those decisions? And then we might want to talk about data literacy and statistics. And again, your ability to really operate and engage with society. So there are those statistics that I know you and I have talked about that people might not view as statistics. So inflation and unemployment estimates are statistics. They are statistics, and they are so fundamental to how our life operates that if you aren't sure what they are or how they're calculated, and that's before you get to the point of 86% think that my shampoo is brilliant, then you have to be sufficiently literate and understand what we're talking about. And it is absolutely so imperative to the way that we operate that's why I love being the VP, and that's why I think it's important. But I don't think it is just an education problem, and I don't think it's just everybody should love stats problem. It's incumbent on both sides to come together and talk. And by that, I mean, it's really, really important that those working data genuinely listen to the concerns of other people who don't work in data. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. Just because we can run at that speed doesn't mean we should. We have to listen and understand why everybody in society might be unsure of what the data is being used for. And then you get into the whole ethical and moral questions of, should we use it? What do we use it for? Who has rights to it? Who has rights to their data being seen, and who has rights to the outcomes? And that's where maths really becomes that cross-cutting aspect. It's not this little niche siloed thing that people do. So that was a very long answer.
No, I think it was brilliant, and you touched on some really. You managed to explain it at the scale in terms of what the big conversation is, and in AI especially, and make it relative to everyday knowledge. I think, and that's I think the challenge. You and I went to a talk recently at the IMA where Veronica Bowman was talking about the weather app on our phones, and every day, and people think, oh, it's great, it's really visual, it's better than I've ever had, it's on my phone, I see it every day. But then when you look at the understanding of what people think the percentages mean against rain, the chance of rain, and a survey that was recently done, the results were astounding, that they thought it would only rain in 20% of that area, for example, rather than it was, if this was to happen 100 times, 20% of the time it would rain. And that to me was, it made it quite apparent as to, again, we had really good advice during COVID with graphs and everything being put in front of us, but what we weren't asking was, did they understand what was being put in front of them? It's great putting them in front of them, and I think the public liked that, but we weren't listening. I think it's very easy to just say, well, we're giving you it, but we're not listening as well. And I know I listened to a talk Rob Santos did in America, who's their basically chief statistician, or was, and he said that around their census, they plan to go out into the communities and get the data teams to actually talk to the local people to understand their concerns, so that then they could then educate them about why the data and filling in the census was important and how it actually could help improve community and community access to things, because that they've understood what their concerns are, but then they can explain to them, well, if you answer these questions and if you answer them in a particular way, and this is why we collect this data, we're then able to evidence that you need this, or this is what's and that to me hit home as to actually the responsibility that everyone has to actually work with society more, well, just more greatly, really, to make sure that they understand and we're listening to what they do or don't understand, so that then we know how to advise them. It's a big task.
And it's a conversation.
Yeah,
I think that's the key part. This has to be a conversation. It has to be a conversation where both sides listen, but it genuinely has to be a conversation. And occasionally I'm asked to give talks about stats and maths, and one of the standard things I sort of talk about is when you go to school, you're taught that you're meant to be moved by books, you're meant to enjoy books, you're meant to like books, and you're meant to have an opinion on art, and you're meant to have an opinion on sculpture, and you're meant to have an opinion on all these humanity and art-based subjects. And everybody seems to forget that it's actually maths and stats that drive social change. It's the percentage of people who live in poverty, or the number of people who can't achieve something, that kick you in the guts, that make people want change. You only have to go back to the Industrial Revolution for people were complaining about the standards and the wages then. But that drove change. It was the numbers that drove the change. And I think that gets so lost. And it's that tipping point, but it's also that conversation of this isn't right, or we're not sure, or how can we? But underpinning all of that is usually a statistic that everybody goes, that's just wrong. How do we change it?
Well, it's that phrase, isn't it? That the RSS does for data, evidence, decisions.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. So that's really great discussion on that point. Thank you. So as a business leader yourself, how important is it, do you identify ways to develop future leaders within your own teams or around in your network, and how do you approach this?
So it's quite a small company. We're 15 people. So the short version of that is you actually don't have any choice, because I can't be everywhere at once, and the company isn't just me. So, presentations, and I know one of our first ever employees, Holly, who's left us now. I think she'd been with the company 4 weeks before she was presenting at an RSS conference, because I was like, that's fine, like your turn, off you go. I think it's really important that everybody remembers their voice is not the most important one and not the only one. And certainly there are the questions I now ask when I get asked to talk is that, why me? Is it just because you're going to need a female business owner, or need a female statistician, or why have you, what is it that I talk about, or about me that means that you want me to talk? And being prepared to step back and go, no, I think you need to talk to, or I think you need to ask, pick another person from your company or not. It's incumbent on everybody to raise voices, not just female business owners, but within my company, it's who is the best person. And I think that just flows through. Who is it that what is it you want to hear about? And then you find somebody else. And that's okay to raise their voices, but you also then need the second part of, you might not have given a talk like this before, and it's going to be okay. We all get things wrong at time. Don't worry that everybody's going to love you. Don't worry that everybody's going to hate you equally. So how can you make sure that those people whose voices you're trying to raise or get heard have enough confidence to stand up there as well? And I think that's both sides of the story.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. And lastly, we've come to the end of our last question. What would be the one piece of advice you would give towards being a successful leader?
Listen. Just listen. It's easy to think sometimes that your view is the right one, the best one. Probably not, truth be told. And if you genuinely want to know what's going on and you genuinely want to know how to help, then you have to have conversations with people and you have to listen, and you have to listen to what is actually going on with them. So, regular check-ins, and not just the huddles, but cups of tea. Listen, make sure you listen. And if you say you're going to do something, do it. But start by listening to see what you need to do.
Brilliant. Thank you. I love that. Well, thank you for joining us today. So I think that's been amazing. A really, really good, interesting talk there. I think it's amazing. Really brought up some really good topics, and I think our listeners will love to hear from this. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
It's been great, and thank you everyone for listening to it. Thank you.